Israel said on Saturday it killed Hezbollah leader Syed Hassan Nasrallah in a powerful airstrike in Beirut's southern suburbs Friday. Here's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant.
The State of Israel has eliminated Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. He was the murderer of thousands of Israelis and foreign citizens.
Hezbollah confirmed Nasrallah was killed without saying how. His death dealt a heavy blow to the Iran-backed group as it reels from an escalating campaign of Israeli attacks.
It's difficult to overstate the significance of Hassan Nasrallah's assassination by Israel.
Firas Maksad, a senior fellow at the Washington-based Middle East Institute think tank, said an attack like this indicates Israel has clearly infiltrated Hezbollah's ranks, and it could lead to the end of the organization.
Hezbollah is going to have to do a great deal of restructuring in the coming weeks and months, and its future, perhaps for the first time since its founding in 1982, is in doubt.
In a statement, U.S. President Joe Biden said Nasrallah's death from an Israeli airstrike is a measure of justice for his many victims, including thousands of Americans, Israelis, and Lebanese civilians. Though he added the U.S. is still trying to use diplomacy to de-escalate attacks in the region. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said Nasrallah's killing would be avenged, and his path in fighting Israel would be continued by other militants. Strikes continued on Beirut's southern suburbs throughout the early evening on Saturday, sending large clouds of smoke over the city. In Israel, air raid sirens sounded across the center of the country on Saturday, including Tel Aviv, and large bangs were heard after a missile was fired from Yemen and intercepted, according to the Israeli military. Hezbollah said in a statement that it would continue its battle against Israel and gave no immediate indication of who might succeed Nasrallah.
We will face any possible attack, and we are ready. If the Israelis decide to enter by land, the resistance forces are ready for a ground engagement. We have prepared and got ready, and with our trust in God Almighty, we are confident that the Israeli army will not achieve its goals, and we will emerge victorious from this battle. We will choose a Secretary General for the party as soon as possible, according to the party's approved selection mechanism. And we will fill the leadership positions on a permanent basis. Rest assured that the choices will be easy because they are clear and because we are united.
Ambulances were seen rushing through streets in southern Lebanon on Sunday as Israel pressed Hezbollah with more strikes after killing the Iran-backed group's leader Syed Hassan Nasrallah in an escalating military campaign. Israel's attacks have dealt a stunning succession of blows to Hezbollah after almost a year of cross-border fire, killing much of its leadership and revealing gaping security holes. Also Sunday, video posted to social media showed a large fireball and smoke plume above the port city of Hodeidah in Yemen. Israel said it hit targets there in response to missile attacks by the Iran-backed Houthis on Israel in recent days. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said, quote, "Our message is clear. For us, no place is too far." White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby said all-out war with Hezbollah or Iran would not help residents of northern Israel return to their homes. He said diplomacy remains the right path. In Iran, which helped create Hezbollah in the early 1980s, senior figures mourn the death of Nasrallah. The country's interior minister said such assassinations, blind and covert assassinations, will have no result for the survival of this regime. Nasrallah's body was recovered intact from the site of Friday's strike, a medical source and a security source told Reuters on Sunday. Hezbollah has not yet said when his funeral will be held.
Austrian voters handed a first-ever general election victory to the far-right Freedom Party on Sunday. Their victory is the latest sign of rising support for hard-right parties in Europe that appears to be fueled by anxiety over immigration. The Eurosceptic Russia-friendly party won nearly 29% of the vote, according to a projection by pollster Foresight late Sunday. Leader Herbert Kickl spoke after the record showing.
And you don't need to worry, this 29% is well invested. It's an excellent investment for the Freedom Party because one thing has happened today. We have actually opened this door. We have opened the door to a new era. We are now really going to write this new chapter in Austrian history together.
A win for the Freedom Party, or FPO, comes 7 decades after its founding under a lawmaker who was a former Nazi. The party has worked to moderate its image, but Kickl remains a provocative and polarizing figure, disliked by other party leaders. They immediately united in rejecting the notion of forming a coalition with him, raising the risk of his victory being a hollow one. A few dozen anti-FPO protesters assembled outside the party's election celebrations late on Sunday as police kept them at bay. The FPO wants to stop granting asylum altogether and build a, quote, Fortress Austria, preventing migrants from entering. Kickl also opposes providing aid to Ukraine and wants sanctions against Russia withdrawn. The FPO has faced backlash from other parties because of its criticism of the EU and failure to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. President Alexander von der Bellen, who oversees the formation of governments, urged parties to find common ground in negotiations in the coming weeks. If Kickl cannot persuade another party to ally with him, it could end the FPO's hopes of forming a government and open the door to a coalition of more moderate parties. Areas of North Carolina hit hard by Hurricane Helene began a huge cleanup and recovery effort on Sunday. The storm has plowed through the southeastern United States over the past several days, destroying roads and bridges, knocking out power for millions, and causing massive flooding from Florida to Virginia. A Reuters tally of state and local officials Sunday evening put the death toll from the storm at least 90 people, with officials afraid more bodies would be discovered. Video from Friday showed streets in the picturesque city of Asheville submerged in floodwater. 30 people died in this county alone, according to the sheriff. Governor Roy Cooper called the storm, quote, a devastating catastrophe of historic proportions, and said search and rescue teams from 19 states and the U.S. government had converged on the state. George Carter was among those Reuters spoke to on Sunday, still reeling from the storm.
When you turn the corner and you see your community just full of buildings and trash and floating boathouses and floating homes, it just sort of takes your breath away. And it was scary.
Property damage and lost economic output will become clearer as officials assess the destruction. But over the weekend, insurers and forecasters said damage estimates range from $15 to more than $100 billion. A U.S. Energy Department official said roughly 2.7 million customers throughout the South were without power on Sunday. In Flat Rock, North Carolina, there were widespread blackouts, and people waited hours in line for gas after the storm caused disruptions to fuel supplies.
When you can't get gasoline, you can't go anywhere. You can't go buy nothing. Of course, there's nothing open right now, but it all depends on these gas stations. You're not going to be able to go nowhere. And it's just a scary feeling.
The White House said President Joe Biden and Vice President and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris plan to visit affected areas this week, once they can do so without impeding the response effort. The campaign of Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump said he would visit Georgia on Monday to receive a briefing on storm damage and, quote, facilitate the distribution of relief supplies.
Hamas announced that an Israeli strike killed its leader in Lebanon, Fateh Sharif Abu el-Amin, on Monday. Meanwhile, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine reported that 3 of its leaders were killed in a strike on Beirut's Kola district. It marks the first attack within Beirut's city limits. The strike hit the upper floor of an apartment building, Reuters witnesses said. Lebanon's health ministry has reported over 1,000 deaths and 6,000 injuries among the Lebanese population, with 1 million people displaced by the fighting. Israel has vowed to keep up the assault and says it wants to make its northern areas secure again for residents who have been forced to flee Hezbollah rocket attacks. Israeli drones hovered over Beirut for much of Sunday, with the loud blasts of new airstrikes echoing around the Lebanese capital. Israel on Sunday also launched airstrikes against the Houthi militia in Yemen and dozens of Hezbollah targets throughout Lebanon after killing the Hezbollah leader. The Houthi-run health ministry said at least 4 people were killed and 29 wounded in airstrikes on Yemen's port of Hodeidah.
Japan's incoming Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba said Monday he's calling a snap general election on October the 27th. He just won a close leadership race to become head of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. The poll, coming 1 year ahead of schedule, will decide control of Parliament's lower house. Lawmakers will meet there tomorrow to confirm Ishiba as the next Prime Minister. He began choosing members of his cabinet on Monday. Key picks have included 2 rival candidates from last week's race. Katsunobu Kato has been tapped for Finance Minister, while Yoshimasa Hayashi was chosen for Chief Cabinet Secretary, a crucial role that serves as the top government spokesman. However, Sanae Takaichi, whom Ishiba only narrowly beat in Friday's leadership election, was not among Ishiba's choices. There were media reports that she had declined a post in the cabinet. Her absence may make it harder for Ishiba to manage the ruling party, which has been weakened by a series of scandals.
Hopes of finding dozens of migrants missing after their boats sank off the Canary Islands were diminishing, authorities said on Sunday, in what could be the deadliest migrant crossing incident from Africa to the Canaries in decades. Patrol boats and helicopters continued a second day of search near the Spanish island of El Hierro after emergency services received a distress call from the boat in the early hours of Saturday. They said wind and poor visibility made the rescue extremely difficult and that the boat sank during the rescue attempt. Rescuers were able to pick up 27 of 84 migrants from the boat, but at least 9 people died in the incident, authorities said, including a child. Candelaria Delgado, who heads up the Canary Islands Regional Social Welfare Department, said minors who have arrived are at a temporary reception centre. She urged the Spanish government to activate a mechanism with the European Union that would allow minors to be transferred to other parts of the continent, saying the island needed help tackling the humanitarian crisis. Bracing for the expected fate for those still missing, Delgado said it would make this incident the biggest crisis the Canaries have experienced in 30 years. Data from the EU's border agency Frontex showed that the route from Africa to the islands has seen a surge in migrants this year, with more than 21,000 crossing in the first 7 months. 3 other boats reached the Canary Islands on Saturday night, carrying more than 200 migrants.
Japanese stocks tumbled Monday morning as investors weighed up the country's new prime minister. The benchmark Nikkei index was down over 4.5% by the midday break. Shigeru Ishiba won the top job in a close-fought election last week and will officially take over on Tuesday. He's seen as a monetary policy hawk and has long opposed the Bank of Japan's massive program of stimulus measures. Some traders see that as increasing the chance of rate hikes. The prospect sent the yen soaring against the dollar, a move that weighed on stocks. A stronger yen hits overseas revenue at Japan's big exporters and makes the country's shares more expensive for foreigners to buy. Auto firms and chip makers were among Monday's big decliners as a result. Toyota sank over 7% in morning trade, while Tokyo Electron was down even more. However, some analysts told Reuters their selling had probably run its course, with markets now adjusted to the new reality. Ishiba's outlook may also be more nuanced than investors expect. In August, he had said that the BOJ was on the right track after 2 recent rate increases. But over the weekend, he told national broadcaster NHK that monetary policy should remain accommodative given current economic conditions.
Investors hit the brakes on Stellantis Monday. Shares in the car giant fell around 14% after it slashed annual forecasts and warned it would burn through more cash than expected. Stellantis blamed higher costs to overhaul its US business and Chinese competition on electric vehicles. The Peugeot and Jeep owner isn't the only major European car maker to warn on profits recently. It joins rival Volkswagen, which cut its annual outlook for the second time in 3 months days ago, while BMW and Mercedes have also lowered their outlooks. The downgrades come as the European Union finalises plans over possible tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. Stellantis said it was dropping expectations for positive free cash flow. It now expects to burn through up to almost $11.2 billion in cash this year. The company said it sees adjusted operating profit margin of 5.5% to 7% this year. That's mostly due to its decision to speed up the normalisation of inventory levels in the US. The carmaker also said operating profit margin would be hit by lower than expected sales in the second half of this year across most regions.
China's factories still aren't running at full tilt, and the service sector doesn't look any better. That was the gloomy picture painted by new data out Monday. The closely watched Purchasing Managers' Index for manufacturers did nudge up a little to 49.8 in September, but that still left it below the 50-point line that indicates falling activity. It's now been below that level for 5 straight months. The numbers come just days after Beijing launched its biggest stimulus package since the pandemic. That included interest rate cuts and help for mortgage borrowers. Further measures are expected to include special bonds to fund increased subsidies for consumer goods and business equipment. Those moves continue to boost stocks, with China's blue chip index up around 8% on Monday. That put the country's equity markets on track for their best month in nearly a decade. Even so, Monday's figures also showed the service sector slipping into contraction for the first time since December. Put it together, and the data may suggest even more economic support is needed if China is to hit its growth target of around 5% for the year. The construction sector was, however, one relative bright spot on Monday. Its PMI number hit 50.7, well above the key 50 mark. Last week, top leaders at China's Politburo meeting called for more efforts to boost the housing market. Reuters has reported that megacities Shanghai and Shenzhen will also take action, lifting all restrictions on home buying.
Continue working to secure a ceasefire deal in Gaza that brings the hostages home, eases the suffering of people in Gaza, preserves the possibility of a more lasting, secure peace for the entire region. Diplomacy remains the best and only path to achieving greater stability in the Middle East. The United States remains committed to urgently driving these efforts forward.
It was still raining and the soil was sliding. People came out crying. I don't know if anyone was buried. They say that people were coming from work when the landslide happened. People were crying. They were terrified by the landslide. The civil protection came. But if it rains, another landslide may happen.
Si sigue lloviendo, se va a deslavar.